All right. Yeah, I'm excited to come back and talk to you guys. So T had mentioned, wanting to learn a little bit more about the F&G product, possibly, or most importantly, probably the Safe Income Advantage product. That's their immediate income option. Now, they do have three options for accumulation, which we can touch on also. But I was going to share a little bit about F&G. So let me pull this up. I'll share my screen and I can pull this up and we can take a look here. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about F&G, their Safe Income Advantage. Again, where Safe Income Advantage fits is for specifically for immediate or short-term income. The reason is F&G does not have a upfront bonus for the purposes of income, but there's two ways that they can increase the payout for clients. One is by giving a bonus, right, and having the income base increase significantly. The second is by growing their income base by deferring and giving them guaranteed growth. And then the third way rather is by increasing the payout percentage, the percent of the income base that they're willing to pay. So F&G, rather than increasing the bonus and giving a high roll-up rate, they do have a roll-up rate, but no bonus up front. And in exchange, what they do is they have a really high payout percentage. So that really works out well in immediate or short-term income compared to deferring, right? If you're going to defer, Nationwide usually comes out ahead if you're deferring a long time, 7 years or more. But if short-term F&G comes out a lot of the time, at older ages, we saw it on Tuesday or Monday when we talked, but at older ages like 68, 69, 70 and up, that's when Global Atlantic looks really good for immediate income. So what we're going to talk about today is just concerns, top of mind concerns for the client. We're going to talk about the product and some of the resources that you have from F&G. Okay, so let's talk about some of the biggest concerns for clients going into retirement. One is running out of money, right? They call this longevity risk. And if you've seen my presentation on Annuity 101, we talk about the risks that annuities can help with. So clients truly are concerned about running out of money, having not saved enough, or whatever the case may be. And the second is the high inflation rates, right? Sequence of inflation, cost of goods increasing, and keeping up with that. Okay, so what F&G does to mitigate those is um, offer annuities that promote stability. Okay. Now we talk about annuities, but believe it or not, only 14% of investors own an annuity. And we've seen the value that annuities can provide to clients, can provide, great protection and guarantees on their savings and investments, etc. But only 14% of investors own an annuity. So I think it's in our interest, especially right now when the market has been up and the expectation is that at some point there will be a downturn, to provide some downside protection on at least a portion of their assets, right? I never suggest putting all of a client's assets into an annuity, but at least a portion to provide some protection. All right. So when considering investments for retirement, this is what clients prioritize. So make note of this as you're talking to your clients. They want to maximize the income that they're going to receive in retirement. What vehicle can allow me to receive the most money in retirement? Having that income guaranteed for life. I want to make sure that that income will continue and will never go away, right? I don't want to outlive my money. And the third is protecting against inflation, the cost of goods going up. Okay. Now, This is a risk tolerance study. So, US investors 30 and older say they are most worried about inflation impacting their retirement, right? 80% of people are concerned about the cost of goods going up, right? They have seen inflation, right? You know, the cost of food items, etc., are high right now. So how do they measure that? Well, they measure it using what they call the CPI, right? The Consumer Pricing Index, and it tracks the cost of food and beverages, housing, apparel, transportation, right? Medical care, recreation, education, communication. Now, 90% of those goods are purchased in urban areas. So they call it the CPIU. So that represents 90% of the population and the goods at the cost of goods that they're purchasing. All right. So this is what we've seen. Inflation has risen the quickest pace in decades, right? We saw from, during COVID, inflation shoot through the roof. Now, inflation has come back down. Right now, we're sitting at about 3% from what I've seen, 2.9, 3% inflation. That means that if your money is not earning 3%, then in essence, the value of your dollar is going down, right? Your purchasing power with your dollar is going down. Okay, so we need vehicles where we can, provide some accumulation and growth. In addition to that, when a client is going to retire, timing matters, right? Sequence of returns risk is the risk of receiving lower negative returns early on in a period when withdrawals are made from an investment portfolio. Okay. That can be drastic in how much money the client has. If for the first, handful of years, your client has negative market returns, right? Or no positive returns in our case, that can affect how long their money lasts, right? So if you're not using a vehicle that has you know, protected values, you can significantly decrease the time that you can plan on receiving income, or you have to adjust how much you're receiving. So, for example, if I wanted to retire in 2026 and I used kind of the 4% rule and I had $1 million and my advisor said, you can take out 4% per year and that will last you for the next, let's call it 25 years. 4% per year, right, goes into 125 times, that's 25 years. Okay. If in 2026 we saw a downturn and the market went down, let's call it 50%, and I lost 50% of my savings, my $1 million got reduced to 500,000. So now I can go one of two ways. I can still take 4%, but base it off of 500,000. So I'm essentially cutting my guaranteed income or my income stream in half, or I maintain the same income stream and have less time, right? My money will run out in half the time. So instead of 25 years, I can expect 12 or 13 years, right? That's pretty scary, right? What we see is if a client can avoid losses in those early years and even have gains in those early years, the value of their dollar will stretch much, much further. Okay. Now, sequence of inflation, this risk is higher inflation early on in a portfolio. Okay. So let's talk about safe income advantage and let's talk about how these work. So there are three options for guaranteed income. Two of them we are less familiar with. One is kind of our level income option. That's what most of the time that we talk about at WFG is a level income option. But F&G, to combat inflation risk, offers two additional options for what they call increasing income. Okay. They offer fixed increases to grow your guarantee by 3.5% each year and inflation based increases. So, depending on that CPIU, right, this consumer pricing index, if the inflation increases significantly, you can get up to 5% each year, and it will vary based on, where the consumer pricing index is at. So this allows you to get increasing income to combat inflation. Okay. Now, you might think, well, why would I need that? Well, the reality is, if we look at charts here from 2000 to about 2023, what we found in the CPIU is that the cost of goods increased by 80% in that time, right? So if we can have a vehicle that increases our income to match inflation, we can maintain and our purchasing power can remain the same. Okay. So this is an example of showing you the different types of income stream, right? So this is historical consumer pricing index, right? This is showing you that cost of goods increasing over time. This, right, 3.5% fixed increasing. The green is the level. So what we see and what I want to show here is that when you start, you are going to get higher guaranteed income with a level option. But over time, the longer the client lives, the more they're going to benefit from having an increasing option. So if you have a client that's going to live a longer time, a longer period, right? If their their life expectancy is a little bit longer, maybe their parents lived into their 90s or something like that, then using an increasing income option could be extremely valuable. This 3.5% is showing you every single year your income would increase by 3.5%, right? So that means if I was getting, you know, $10,000 a year, 3.5% of 10,000 is $350. In year two, instead of getting 10,000, I would get 10,350, and it would continually step up by 3.5%. Now, following that CPIU, what we see is that, you know, decreases slightly. But the trade-off is up front, they're going to get less money, right? So as long as when the client starts taking income, they are okay with the lesser amount to start, and the expectancy is that their income will increase over time, then you see that that can benefit them significantly. Okay. Now, if a client is much older, right, and we were starting and their life expectancy was maybe only 5 or 10 years, it doesn't really make sense to use an increasing option. It's better to use the level option, right? Because look, this is at 60, right? For about the first 7 or 8 years, you're going to get more in a level contract. Not only that, you would have received less in those first few years. So, in order to break even, you might have to go about 10 or 12 years out to where you will have received the same amount of money. Beyond that is where you're going to come ahead using an increasing income option. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. All right. So, let's talk about what makes the Safe Income Advantage different. It does not have a bonus, okay, but it does have a roll up, a guaranteed roll up rate on the income base. That means if you defer, for every year that you defer, you get 7.2% compounding. So if you were to defer 10 years, it would double the amount that you put in for the purposes of income. Now, like I mentioned before, there's other companies that have a bonus and have a higher roll-up rate. So if you are deferring, in most cases, it makes more sense to use a different carrier. Okay. Now, short term, very, very strong. Again, we just talked about the types of income, level income, or two types of increasing income. Whoop, I'll go back here. It does have growth and it uses some different index strategies. They have a uh, a volatility control called the Balanced Asset 5. They also work with BlackRock, the BlackRock Market Advantage, and they also have access to the S&P. I will tell you though that for this, for F&G, they are not a company you are going to see growth with. Their caps, their participation rates are very low. They put everything into the guarantees for the income. Okay. So don't expect this money to grow. This contract would be used specifically for income, and that's it. They do have an impairment multiplier, though, which I think is very, very attractive. It can up to double your income, even in the state of California. So F&G became very popular in California because they had that impairment multiplier or income doubler with in California, which most companies did not have. Now, some other companies have been added there, but F&G was very popular in California. Obviously, gender neutral payout factors, so no different payouts for male or female. I don't know of any carriers that do that, but it does not change for male or female. All right, so this slide is actually I like this slide because it shares an idea. A lot of times at WFG, agents get caught up in the idea of a bonus upfront for income, especially, right? But just because a product has a bonus does not mean that it's going to pay the client the most. Okay, it's very important to understand that. So there's three ways that you can grow a client's guaranteed income. One is by offering a bonus. Two is by offering a roll up. And the third is by increasing the payout. Okay. So, example one here is a company that has a large bonus, right? A large payout, but a very small, or excuse me, a large roll up, but a very small payout. Option two is more of like a hybrid, right? A small bonus, a bigger roll up, and a medium sized payout. And example three completely eliminates the bonus, but has a decent, strong roll up, and the payout percentage is very strong. Okay. In some instances, option three, without a bonus, is going to pay the most. And the perfect example of that is the F&G product. An example of option one is Nationwide. Nationwide has a very strong bonus, 30% bonus. They have a 9.5% roll up for the purposes of income, but their payout percentages are significantly lower. Okay, that's why in early years, right, short term, right, investments, this option is going to be better than Nationwide. Nationwide wins if you wait 7, 8, 9, 10 years to take income. Okay. So this is showing you what it does look like with the 7.2%, right? You do get that roll up. It will double the income base over 10 years. But again, in my opinion, this is strongest short term. All right. So this is talking a little bit about the impairment multiplier. Okay, so in order to get the income enhancement, the income double, that means if I'm getting, let's say, $10,000 a year in income, if heaven forbid I can't perform two of the six activities of daily living, which are these, eating, bathing, dressing, continence, transferring, and toileting, then I have the ability to take more out of my contract, right? So my guarantee, let's say my guarantee is $10,000 per year. If I qualify to help cover my costs for healthcare, I can now double that. I can pull out $20,000. Now, I want you guys to be clear. We call this an impairment multiplier, an income doubler, because it is not long term care. The reason it is not long term care is long term care is an additional benefit. That's something you pay for. This is not something you pay for, it's included. And what you're getting is essentially your own money out of the contract. You just get to take it out twice as fast. Okay. So with long-term care, you're paying a fee and you get a benefit, additional benefit above and beyond your money, right? You might get 2 times or 3 times whatever you put in for long-term care. With this, you all you have is your own money, right? There's no additional benefit. You just get to access your money twice as fast. So what that means is you can pull out your money twice as fast for a uh, until the cash goes down to zero in the contract. Once the cash is gone, then you still have your guaranteed income, but it reverts back to, let's call it the $10,000 instead of the 20 that you were receiving. Okay. So I just want you guys to understand how that works. When we talk about an income doubler, it is attractive because they can access their money and help pay for things, but that money doesn't mean it's going to just double and last forever. It all it means is they're able to access their money twice as fast. Okay. Now, they get a true doubler for a single annuitant. If you are taking joint income, both people, both husband and wife, have the ability to trigger the income enhancement. But if you have a joint annuitant, so joint ownership or joint income, the maximum you can get is 1.5 times instead of 2 times. Okay. So just be aware of that the income enhancement is an income doubler for a single annuitant, but for a joint annuitant, it is only 1.5. So this is showing you the interest crediting options. I was not joking when I told you that this is not going to be a growth vehicle. The caps on the S&P, right? Standard 1-year cap is 3%. Now, I don't want you guys to think, oh, well, Mark, why would I? That's terrible. The caps are not bad. But you have to understand the reason that a client is purchasing this type of contract is not for the growth. The reason the client is purchasing this contract is for the income. And so if the income is the highest, then this is still going to be the best option for the client. Okay. But I want you to be aware it's not going to be a strong growth vehicle. Okay. Oops. So this is balanced asset 5. This is their index. I'm not a huge fan of the balanced asset 5, so I'm gonna jump over it. But I want to give you some of the details of the contract. So you can write this contract up to age 80. It is extremely powerful for clients older in age who want to start income because the payout percentages are very, very high. Okay. Minimum premium is 10,000. That's the lowest that you can put into this contract. What is very unique about F&G compared to every other carrier is that you can add money to your annuity contracts. So anytime you want to add, the minimum is going to be $2,000 per interest option. So if you have two different, I invest in the S&P and that, other index, the minimum is going to be $4,000, right? So you can add premiums into this contract. But remember, if you have qualified money, let's say you roll over an old 401k and you put $100,000 into this contract, you cannot add cash because cash is considered non-qualified money. You can't mix qualified and non-qualified. So you have to only be able to add qualified funds if that's the case. So in that example, you have an old 401k, you add $100,000, 5 years later, you switch jobs or you retire from your current position, you want to add money into the contract, you can roll that annuity into this, or you can roll that 401k, that qualified money into this same contract. And let's say you add an additional 100,000, you can do that with this contract. Most contracts, you're not able to do it. You have to start a new contract. Okay. So we talked about the interest crediting options. The death benefit is paid as a lump sum. Now, when I talk about death benefit, remember the death benefit is just the cash, the accumulated value, the account value. There's no enhanced death benefit. This is not life insurance. That's why we sell life insurance, is to provide death benefit, but the purpose of this vehicle is for income. All right. Now, one thing that makes it nice is it does have penalty-free withdrawals. You can take up to 10% after the first year. Okay, after the first year. This is the surrender charge schedule in Texas. Pretty typical, 998,765, right? It goes down over time. It is RMD friendly, meaning required minimum distribution. So if you have a client with qualified money, meaning they have never paid taxes on those dollars because it grew in their 401k, and they reach the age at which the government says, hey, you have to start taking money out for you to pay taxes, that is the RMD, required minimum distribution. Currently, that age is age 73. Okay. So if the client has not started taking their income stream yet, the guaranteed income stream, I should say, they can take out RMDs out of the contract without any sort of penalty or market value adjustment. Okay. This is the last thing that I think is very, very attractive for this product. It is very strong for F&G because they have waiver of premiums, right? Every carrier typically has a nursing home waiver and a terminal illness waiver, meaning if you have your money in an annuity, right, you put it in a contract and essentially you can't access it as a lump sum for a period of time unless you have a terminal illness. If you get diagnosed with a terminal illness with 12 months to live or less, then you can access the money. The second is, hey, I am going to a nursing home for licensed nursing care. Generally, you can access the money. The feature that makes F&G different is they allow you to access the money if you have home health care provided by a licensed home health care professional, right? So most companies require you to go into a nursing facility. That is not the case with F&G. A client could access all of their money if they wanted to get out of the contract and take their money all in a lump sum if they have home health care provided to them. Okay. So again, this is that unable to perform two of the six activities of daily living, they can access their money. Okay. So some unique features there. Let's stop there and open it up for any questions that you might have, and then we'll talk about some of the resources. So any questions on what we talked
Yes,
about
sir.
so far?
Can you give us like an example of like a candidate, like a perfect candidate for to introduce the product feature?
If a perfect candidate for which feature?
For this product.
Yeah, sure.
Someone.
Yeah, so that I am going to let me close this out and uh let's go to the AMS website. Okay. A perfect client is one that is going to benefit from receiving the most income from this type of product. So I'm going to go to the AMS website. I'm going to go to annuity rate watch. Okay. And I'm going to go to the rider quoting tool. Now, we have used this and showed you guys this in the past, but let's put valued client, right? Now, this is best for a client who is taking income either immediately or right away. So, what that means to me is most clients who are turning on their income stream are going to be in their mid 60s or older, right? 65, early 60s and up.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So let's say we have a 63-year-old, okay, in the state of Texas. They've got 500,000 and they want to put 500,000 towards their income stream. They want to take income in 2 years. I want to see what company is going to provide the most value. Now, I don't know if F&G is going to be the best option, but I don't want to see the ones that reduce. But look at that. F&G Safe Income Advantage for a 63-year-old taking income in 2 years. F&G is going to pay the most. Now, Corebridge, American General, AIG, now Corebridge, is very close. Okay, so but F&G comes out ahead
So you
in
still would
this.
recommend the client FNG and
Well, in this
bonus.
scenario, right?
Yeah,
There's other
yeah.
factors at play, but this is the vehicle that's going to provide the most income guaranteed for my client at that age.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mark.
Yep, no worries. Good question. Any other questions in regards to the product and kind of what we talked about so far?
Yes, I have the question. You're talking about they have sick living active, and when they get like hit in like home care, whatever, like you said, they require they can take lump sum, but lump sum include the interest and how they pay for the tax.
So remember, I mean, yes, there's interest, but depending on, we need to make sure we understand that there's a difference between the account value and the income base. Okay. So I'm going to run an illustration and we'll take a look at it. All right. So let me pull this up here. It's going to take its sweet time. Sorry. All right. So, all right. Create an illustration. New client, right? Valued client. Let's
Mhm.
say my client is 63. We're in Texas. Okay. Fixed index annuity. And I'm going to do the safe income advantage. Yeah. Whoop. Okay. Initial premium, I'm going to do 500,000, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And level income, guaranteed minimum withdrawal benefit, right? So schedule premium is a zero so initial premium is 500,000. I'm going to use qualified money. I'm going to use non-qualified because it requires me to put a birthday, then I don't have to worry about it. Okay. Deferral period. Let's see. I'm going to put 2 years. All right. And I think that's it. I think we can calculate. All right. So this is going to pull up an illustration. Okay. Issue age 63, 500,000, withdrawal payment 65. Okay. So there's two scenarios, right? There's the guaranteed scenario, and then there's the current scenario. The current scenario is based on the interest, right? Option. So what we show is that in the first 2 years, we're not taking income, and then after the second year, they have the ability to turn on the income stream. Okay. So in both scenarios, right, this client would receive $48,846, right? This is showing them turning on their taking income in that year. Now, if they waited or if they deferred based on guarantees, you can see how much income they would receive or receive on a level if they waited longer. But if they started after the second year, they would receive 48,864. And this is the income doubler. This is the amount that they would receive if they went on claim, okay? But let's go down here and look at the actual illustrations because it helps us understand. Okay, so this is the guarantees. Remember, we are not expecting any returns. Account value, interest crediting rate, 0, 0, 0, 0. So we are looking at no returns. Okay, this is our account value. This is our cash. This is our surrender value, meaning if my client walked away and broke the contract, they would be charged the surrender penalty, and this is the amount that they would receive, right? Most clients are not going to do that because they're looking at keeping this for life. But this client would receive $44,933 every year for the rest of their life. Okay. What we see is that once we start taking money out, their account value drops pretty quickly to 0, right? In the 12th year, their contract value would be at 0, but they still receive income for the rest of their lives. Okay. Now, this over here, right, is our income base. Look at the difference between our account value, our cash, and our income base. Remember, for every year the client defers, their income base is growing by 7.2%. So you might say, well, Mark, how is their account value going down? Well, if there's 0 return, they're paying a rider charge for the income, and their account value goes down. Once they start taking cash, then it drops by the rider charge and by the amount they're pulling out if they're not receiving anything. The income base is only used to calculate this number. Okay. It does not mean anything for the client other than this is how we calculate how we turn on income. Okay. So if a client passes away, their death benefit is tied to their account value, right? The minimum guaranteed surrender value. So you see that this is the minimum guaranteed surrender value. So that's what the client has, okay? So keep that in mind, right? This number, when we get the roll up and we get the income base, this is not a value that the client can benefit from other than it calculating the higher income. The only thing that gets passed on to a client is their account value or the minimum guaranteed surrender. So if I scroll down here and look at this is assuming market return, remember we're only in the S&P and the cap is only 3%, right? Your account value might be higher than the minimum guaranteed. So your death benefit is going to be equal to whatever is higher, your account value or the minimum guaranteed surrender. Okay. But once the cash is drawn down to zero, there is not a death benefit. Okay. Does that, I know there's a lot of numbers on this page. Does that make sense to you guys? What questions do you have about what we're looking at?
I think I got it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. I I know that was a long drawn out, but it's sometimes it's easier to see it than it is to try and explain it to you without visualizing what's happening in the contract. But there are a lot of values on the page. So initial premium, the 500,000 they put in, what their actual account value is, right? The amount that they receive on a guarantee, what the surrender value is if they terminate the contract, how much they would receive in a lump sum if they walked away from the contract. This is the income base, so the number they are calculating the guaranteed income stream from, what percent they're paying at that age. So they're paying 7.8% at age 65.
Wow.
Right? And then this is that income enhancement value. You can see once there's no cash in the contract, the client no longer has the ability to have the income enhancement, right? They would still receive the 44,933, but no longer can get the income doubler. Okay. And then lastly, death benefit is obviously if there's still cash in the contract, this is what the family would receive as a death benefit. Okay. So perfect. What other questions have you guys got?
Can you we can run illustration. We had to register REA account or where we can run illustration.
Yeah, so in order to run an illustration, you have to be appointed with the company first, right? You have to be appointed with F&G. Now that process takes a little bit, right? That is done through the AMS website. Once you log into the AMS website, again, you click on fixed index annuities and you go to carrier contracting. Okay. Carrier contracting will take you here. You have to click I agree because it takes you to Sure LC. Sure LC is a separate third-party site, but you need to register on there. Okay, once you're registered, you can log in. Now it's showing all my information needs to be updated, but how you get there, and once you have all this in good order, is you click on request. All right, you click on request and you choose. Now it's all my information needs to be updated, but you would choose F&G and you click create request. And so that's how you get appointed. Now I will tell you, they take a little bit of time. They have been known to take 3 or 4 days in order to get appointed. Okay. So once you get appointed, you can register on saleslink.fglife.com, right? So I'm going to put that in the chat. Okay. So you can register there and run illustrations from that point. Now, that being said, at any point, you can always call AMS and we'll run the illustrations for you, right? Our sales desk is great about doing that. But in order to run them yourself, again, you need to have access to SalesLink and you need to be appointed before you can get access. Once you get access, you log in, you go to sales tools and you go to illustrations and you can run annuity illustrations, right? And it'll pull that up here and you can do that. Okay. Now, and just like I showed you, kind of running the illustration. So, any other questions on how to access everything? They do have a lot of resources. They have a website. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it. This is just resources, product resources for annuities. It does not have the illustration tool, etc., but it has everything that you would need to know to explore some of their products. Okay, the Safe Income Advantage, the Power Accumulator, those are their income products. And then they have 3 accumulation, the Accelerator Plus, Accumulator Plus, and the Flex Accumulator. So you can click on any of the products and see details about that product, right? Download the materials, view the current rates, and again, any of the marketing materials that I had talked with you about. Okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. What do you want to go back over? I feel tempted to look at that illustration again. Just because, F&G is a little bit unique. I'm going to start at the top and let's just talk about it for the next few minutes and then we can finish up. But so this is the F&G illustration. Okay. Anytime I'm sharing an illustration with a client, and I'll tell you, once you get familiar with annuities, oftentimes you don't have to show or sell based on an illustration. Okay. You can show them the guarantees in the illustration, but a lot of times if you have the trust built up, you tell Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is the best option available for you for the most guaranteed income, right? That's going to pay you this, right? I can show you an illustration. You can provide that to them, but just know that a lot of times showing an illustration can put a client into the weeds. There's a lot of numbers. They don't necessarily understand everything that's going on. So, but if you are going to show them, I like to try and keep it simple. Okay. So this first page is basically a summary page. This is prepared for the client, right? Single life. They're age 63. We're putting in $500,000. We're turning on income in 2 years. The current rider charge is 1.15%, right? Guaranteed withdrawal percentage is 7.82. That's very strong. And we're waiting 2 years, right? From 63 to 65. And so based on the current rates, this is the amount of income they would receive, right? 44,933 in both the current rates and the guaranteed rates. So the income is the same based on market return because the roll-up is greater than what they would receive in the market, right? With the caps where they're at. So this is going to be the same. So I like to show them, I do like to show them this first page because it shows them if they defer one more year, right? We're showing them the 44,933, but if they wait one more year, their guaranteed income steps up to 48,846. And they can see, okay, well, if I wait to 66 or, oh, hey, I want to wait till 67 instead of 65, then I know that I will, instead of getting 44,000 per year, I'll get 52,000 per year, right? Say, I want to maximize my Social Security. I can work for 2 more years, or I can wait 2 more years to turn this on. It's going to give me $7,000 more, $8,000 more per year in guaranteed income if I just wait those 2 extra years from 65 to 67. Okay. With this contract, I think it's important. The guaranteed rates, I would just go straight down to the current rates because we saw that the income is no different on the current rates compared to the guaranteed income, right? So just use the current rates and show them, hey, this is historically, right? This is showing some return, right? And show them this page. And, there's again a lot of numbers on this page, but the important ones to show the client are the guaranteed number of income, the death benefit numbers if heaven forbid they passed away, right? And showing them that their money is growing guaranteed for the purposes of income until they're ready to turn on the income stream. And then lastly, that impairment multiplier, the income doubler, if heaven forbid they had that income or the can't perform 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. Okay. So that being said, that I try and keep it as simple as possible. I don't want to get into the weeds with the client because sometimes they're going to ask questions that we may not know the answer to. And if you try and answer the question, right, that you don't know the answer to, it might come across as negatively like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, right? Best case scenario is in that where if you don't know the answer, you say, you know what, I'm not sure. Let me double check on that and get you an answer. But in a worst case scenario, it's you fumble over your words about, how something works that you didn't necessarily understand. And then the client doesn't loses trust, right? So I try and keep it as simple as possible when talking about annuities and when I'm showing an illustration. Okay. All right. So we got a couple minutes left. Any last questions before I turn it back over to T? If not, no big deal. I will be in the office today later at about 5.
Yeah. So it looks very good. So the policy is good for people to take the income immediately, right?
Correct.
But
Yeah. They
if
can
I had the client, you put the money inside and you want to take the income after 5 years. So,
after 5 years, we just, you know, if you go up to the first page, right, it'll tell you how much that would work with. We would want to determine if this product is the best for a client taking income after 5 years, right? So after 5 years, the guaranteed income is 56,911. So what I would do before I did that, if a client said, "Hey, I'm going to take income in 5 years," I would use the annuity rate watch tool, and let's look at our same client, right? Valued client, 62, Texas, 500,000. But now instead of taking income in 2 years, or we did 63, didn't we? 63. We're going to say, my client wants to wait 5 years. And I'm going to run this solution, and I'm going to, nothing with reducing benefits. I'm going to see, in this case, it's still F and G. So if they're deferring for 5 years, F and G wins. Okay. Nationwide is coming closer now, right? They had that 9.5% roll up. But remember when I told you, when I showed you that slide with the circles that said some companies give a bonus, some companies, Nationwide gives a big bonus, 30% bonus, 9.5% guaranteed growth. So look at their income base when their client turns on income. They're calculating the income off of over $1 million. Now with F&G, they only got 7.2% for those 5 years that they waited. So we're calculating off of 707,000. But look at the difference. F&G is going to pay 8.04% of 707,000 compared to the much lower payout from Nationwide of the higher number. So in this case, even though Nationwide looks like with the bonus and the roll up, right? Oh, over $1 million, that's amazing. But because of the lower payout, F&G comes out ahead and is going to pay, right, about $1,800 more annually this client, right? Does that make sense to you
How about
guys? So
how about
even,
death
go
benefit?
ahead,
How
say
about
that
death
again.
benefit?
Death
When
benefit?
like the death benefit?
Yeah, so the death benefit has nothing to do with this, right? Because this is not their cash, right? The death benefit, and it doesn't show the cash in this or here in this scenario. The death benefit is just going to be based upon the cash in the contract. So whatever the cash grew to based on what index strategies they chose.
So how about like when my client it take about 5 years, I mean like 2, 3 years after that, but they still have like the cash value still there, but like the
So
nationwide
so
they
let's
still have bonus.
well the bonus doesn't mean anything for that death benefit. Bonus only affects the income base. It does not benefit. So let's go back and make sure we understand this, right? So I'm going to use the global or the F&G product. If I look at the illustration, okay, this is the client's income base, right? 574,000. This is never what the client's death benefit is passed on. So the death benefit you see after, let's say, year 5 is 372,000. That is going to be based on the cash that's left in the contract, not on the income base. So we would have to compare both products, the Nationwide and the F&G, to see what product is going to provide more death benefit. But you need to also understand that what is the purpose the client is buying? Are they buying it for death benefit or are they buying it for income? If they're buying it for income, you provide them the product with the most value for income. And then if they have concerns about death benefit, that's when you use a life insurance contract, right? To provide additional death benefit. Okay. But we need to understand the income base, the bonus that the client gets, the guaranteed growth, it does not affect the account value. And in fact, if we got no market return, the income base is going up and the value of their contract is going down because they're paying a fee, right? So in the first 2 years, their income base grew to 574,000, but their death benefit if they passed away in year 2 is 487,000 less than what they put in because they were paying a fee for income. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. All right. Well, I hit my top of the hour. I will be in the office a little bit later. I appreciate you guys, but I will hand it back over to T.
Mark, one last question, be real quick.
Sure.
The analysis that you had before where it's showing all of the companies, is that analysis is only good for people that are much older, right? Where they're not putting their money in for a long term, right?
No. I mean, you can use that tool to put a much younger person and now, for example, I'll
I
just
thought for
pull.
nationwide, it would be better for someone that's putting it in for, 10, 15
It
years.
is. It is better. So let's go back here. But we just showed someone
Or
putting in
63.
and waiting either 2 years or 5 years. But let's say you've got a younger client who's 55, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is taking income much longer, waiting, right? Let's say they wait 12 years and I run. All right, no reducing benefits. In this case, look at that. Nationwide comes out way ahead. 91,000 compared to the next closest at 82,000. So if you have a client that's waiting to take income 7 years or longer, Nationwide wins every time.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right. All right, T, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's amazing product for client, and I believe so people can apply immediately for our client. And I will see you today at 5 p.m.
Okay.
in office. Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone. I see everyone in Houston in office at 5 p.m.
All
Thank
right. See
you.
you
Have a
guys.
good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.